So I had this idea when I was on vacation, and I figured that thematically it was a little bit similar to some things that we've talked about recently. So I was gonna kind of push it back, but we're we're in dire straits.
Yeah, we're in. I mean,
We haven't recorded in so long.
It's been a while.
And
oh no, you're right, because the last one we pushed off until September 1st when we finally released it, because you were dragging ass on editing.
You're welcome. And
thanks a lot, Greg.
and so I was like, oh, maybe I'll save this idea for a little bit. I was like, I'm not gonna tell Darren about it. I'm gonna keep it secret.
Yeah, I've received probably a total of less than 20 words about it. Total in text and in person.
This is how I want it to be like this. I want to surprise you. Because at least
I'm so surprised.
Yeah, I know.
You can't see my face right now, but it's the same face that I always have. Because I'm incredibly...
The Darren face.
The Darren face.
So, this... Basically, I've been watching a bunch of lectures recently about... kind of like a sort of... they're a little bit bizarre. They're like an evolutionary and psychological take on, like, the biblical stories. And so it's really it's really more like, hey, look at all these stories that are at like core to our culture and they've been around for a while and that have similar stories throughout other cultures. Like, what are these like saying about the human experience? It's kind of what it's like.
Kind of, through a psychological or whatever.
Yeah. So it's not like, hey man, these stories are real. It's like, hey man, these stories are real asterisk. They're like real in like they're a real part of the human condition.
Yeah, like there is something about it that necessitates the formation of these stories.
Yeah. And
do you have examples?
I guess one like the flood. So and the the message that the professor was saying it was in there was the like if you have if you don't attend to the things that need to be attended to and you don't live virtuously, then when tragedy happens, the flood, which can come about through inaction or through just nature's whim, then you won't be prepared and you will suffer at the worst. But if you're like virtuous, then you'll like have an arc or whatever, that kind of thing. That's that's sort of the idea of it. And there's always kind of like a little and this is expected, but there's always some reaching for kind of figuring out what it's really about, which is the whole point of the lectures. So.
Yeah, no, it's to spur the imagination. Honestly, it sounds a little bit like a Stuff to Blow Your Mind podcast episode, which if you don't listen to them, they're actually some pretty good listens.
I don't, but I should. And I'm just
there's a plug for a podcast that's way bigger than ours.
I'm watching these lectures. Like I'm playing video games and listening to these lectures. So I've got like I haven't been keeping up with the Chain of Acheron, Matthew Colville's
Oh my goodness, Greg.
Yeah.
That's heresy.
I'm like 4 episodes behind because
I am all of the episodes
instead
behind.
I've sunk like 16 hours into these lectures.
Where can we find these lectures, Greg?
So
I'll link it in the description in the doobly-doo.
They're by Jordan Peterson. You can find them on his YouTube channel. They're like 2 years old right now. They're pretty neat. I've been having a good time, and I'm getting around to the point here. I promise.
Yeah. Stop beating around the bush, Greg. The bush can't take it anymore.
Well, no. That's the whole point of this. That's the whole point of this thing. So one of the ways that the experience of people was being described by Peterson was kind of like a dream which you exist in, and it's sort of like this idea that like the air quotes dream that you perceive is more true than in a different kind of true than actual like physical reality and matter, if that makes sense. And it's very it's metaphorical. It's not really meant to be taken literally. Like it's not like, oh, what your perceptions are actually determine what the universe is, but it's more like like your perceptions of what happens around you in reality are more true to your human experience than anything else. You know, so there's that big caveat of it being like anthropocentric. But he was talking about like, oh, you're kind of like you're in this dream sort of thing, and it's sort of like part of that is sort of like the society and the culture that you're in, and so it's kind of like you're in this. The reason why I was describing it as a dream was that there's sort of like it's not really your own, and there's sort of this vague and hazy understanding of really everything that's in it.
Okay.
So, he was going into these mythological stories to try to gain more information about this dream, in effect, of what like what our experience actually is, or what it has been like in the past, at least. And yeah, I was just thinking about that, and I was like walking through the woods on vacation, right? And I was like, that's a neat idea. And slowly over time, a bunch of these thoughts came together into what I'm currently calling the very original name, The Dream, like proper noun, capital T, capital D. And what this is, it's sort of like another, I mean, in some sense you could call it like a plane of reality.
Okay.
But it's not like, oh, hey, I go through a portal and I'm there. It's not like planes in D&D where like you physically go there. It's like another level. It's basically like another level of consciousness.
Okay.
So this
so
is
it's not
really
it's not
new
like
agey.
astral projection. It's like this is like galaxy brain shit kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like very new agey, right?
Okay.
And basically like the reason why this is cool, I'm gonna explain this later, but I realize that this sort of force, this sort of the dream would be able to explain, divination and prophecies and a lot of other things in my setting, which I always were kind of like, man, I guess those things are there, but like I didn't really have like a reason why, and I sort of felt like I wanted something.
Okay, so this is your attempt to kind of like justify in a way that you think is cool the existence of those things that you want to be in your setting.
To justify those things, but
was it a good puzzle piece?
It's cool that it justifies those things and it makes those things more interesting. Okay,
so you either you would have found a justification for those in a different way, or you would have just been like, oh, whatever, they exist and it's not important to know why.
They exist, but it's like I notice often that when I usually I'm like, oh no, I'm not sure if this thing is in my setting or not, and then like, oh, I have to run a game, and then I'm kind of like, well, I guess it's there because it's appropriate. It's there because it's thematic. It's there because it'll just be easy, to like I won't have to spend 5 minutes explaining it to my players if I'm just like, oh, they're just orcs, right? And so that was something that I kind of would have done beforehand with like, oh yeah, how does divination magic work? Like, big shrug, like it just works, you don't really know, it's magic, right? But now I have an explanation, and it's something that I still would not want the players to know, but they could slowly learn over time. So this is something that I'm not exactly sure how I would do this, but I wouldn't want people just to know outright, yeah, this is how it works. This is how the mechanics work, unless there's people that are particularly tuned into it. So let me actually get to explaining what this thing is.
Should we introduce ourselves?
Oh, hey, I'm Greg.
Hi. Yeah, it's been like 10 minutes into this episode. I'm Darren.
Yeah.
And this is the Lore Foundry.
This is the Lore Foundry. So what the dream is a collective unconscious between people and in some ways the forces of nature, but it's mostly that of like sentient beings and some animals, but there there's still like there's a bit of the force of nature in it, and it is another kind of reality, like another it's a world of thoughts and inhibitions and your subconscious instincts and things like that, which you contact, which you go to when you're dreaming, or when you're having or when you're daydreaming, or when you're having like a reverie of some kind, or you're like in hypnagogia, which is like when you're just when you set your alarm a whole bunch of times, you're when you snooze a whole bunch of times, and you have those really vivid dreams in between waking up. That's hypnagogia. And so those are all like whenever that happens, whenever you're
Mhm.
dreaming, you're actually connected to like the collective unconscious of the
Everything.
world. Yeah, pretty much.
So it's like, the brain cloud, I guess, if you will. And is this like for non-sentient creatures as well, where it's like
Yeah.
the trees have the
Yep.
dream?
So
Okay.
it's very subtle, and only people that would be either they're more trained or they're trained in particularly detecting kind of the nature sort of thing.
If you were Leonardo DiCaprio in Inception, for example,
but like you could feel like the creep of glaciers and
Ooh.
the water like eroding away the shore and the trees growing
while you were in the dream.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Or if you contract, there are techniques to contact the dream while you're awake.
Okay.
Called reveries.
Okay.
And that those would be times where you maybe would be trying to feel that sort of thing. But yeah, so it's a collective unconscious, and when you yourself are dreaming, you are in what I want to come up with some more names for this, but right now I'm calling just a minor dream.
Okay.
Or a lesser dream, and it's kind of like its own little pocket of dreaming, and it's it's tangentially connected to everything else, but really it's its own thing.
Yeah.
But it is still connected, and there's some crossover there, which can
it's like a bubble.
Yeah,
perhaps.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. But there's some crossover that can happen, which can maybe something will try to come into your dream and give you a message or interrogate you or try to do harm to your physical body.
Freddy Krueger style.
Yeah, Freddy Krueger style. Okay. Exactly. And so someone that is like particularly well trained, like there's kind of like a number of stages of like getting better at this technique and like starting to understand what like the dream is. And so the beginning would just be lucid dreaming, like remembering and knowing you're in a dream, and then starting to kind of be able to control it. And I don't think that's going to be control in like a direct sense, like, oh, you turn into a crab, now Darren's talking to me as a crab. It's more like you can elicit the kind of things that you want to see, or you're like, I want to you could the responses would be like cryptic, right? So you're like, set like you're like, send me someone to help, like send someone that would help me, or like I want assistance, right? And then there would be like a metaphorical savior appearing of some kind, and that could be that could be an actual savior that will happen to appear to help you out, or someone that you think is going to be happening to help you out, or someone who just did, or a religious kind of savior. It could it would be a metaphorical thing
that you would see in your dream that would incline you to believe that person or some metaphor thereof would be assisting you in real life in some short order.
Yeah, but so the first stage of lucid dreaming, which isn't a very powerful technique. It's kind of more it's more like you're aware of what's going on.
Okay.
And then beyond that is more exciting things that are no longer close to actual what real life dreaming is like. So the first one would be you're able to like go beyond your minor dream into the dream proper,
super sane dreaming.
And basically be able to explore. And it would be a place where you could really what would be there would be knowledge that you could learn, because whenever someone goes to sleep, the things that they've learned, the things that they know, then pass on into the dream, and it can be, you can go out there and try to learn it. Yeah, basically.
So it's basically the universal cloud storage of memory.
Yeah, right. And
which is just a Linux server out in Arizona.
Yeah, and you could go out there and you could witness like other people who are sleeping at this time, or you could witness other people who have or are also like lucid dreaming with you and are searching around, and you could contact and actually like have communications with other people in
Yeah,
this
there's
realm.
a spell in D&D, and I know that you don't necessarily run in D&D, but I think it is called like dreaming or something, where you can like go implant yourself into someone else's dream and like leave them a message. This would be like a very direct means to do that.
Like that's absolutely one of the things that you could do.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And this doesn't have like a physical, the dream doesn't have like a physical space. It's sort of how close things are to each other is really more related by like thought, like how close things are together in your mind.
Okay.
How close
is that with like standard like divination tropes? Like, do you know this person really well?
Exactly.
Do you have a totem of them, or a lock of hair, or what have you?
Exactly.
Or do you just have a name,
sort of thing,
or a general description? Yeah.
Okay. And if you're trying to find out information, like how salient that idea is, it would have a big effect on how easy it is to learn. So like if someone's like, oh, I found the Holy Grail in Castle Mountain Haven, right? Like the Holy Grail's in Castle Mountain Haven would be a lot easier to like pick up on and learn about than the person who finds the Holy Grail in Castle Mountain Haven is instead like, oh, I found a magic cup and I'm in a castle on a mountain. Like that, if they don't have the proper nouns for things, if they don't have like, in a sense, the platonic ideals of what they are, if that makes sense, then it's a lot harder to transmit and to like learn about. So someone who knows exactly what the hell it is they just found and can very articulately describe what it is, and they have there's a word that exists in like the that like everyone uses.
At that point it'd be essentially like a true name for that item.
Universally
under
quotes.
True name having
it'd be more like
a connotation,
for lack of a better term, more like a trope.
Okay. Just a universal identifier word.
Yeah.
Right.
And but if someone doesn't know those things, that could be a lot harder.
Okay.
And also like that knowledge doesn't get into the dream unless you actually like interface with it, basically.
Okay.
So if you chose to not sleep, like you find the Holy Grail and you know that your enemies are like reading your dreams, then you're like, oh well, I can just not sleep, I guess, and then they won't know, right?
So if you were a person who you needed your sleep regularly or whatever, if you wanted to keep a dig or whatever, like you send someone out, you send Indiana Jones out to get the Holy Grail, right? But you don't inform Indiana Jones of exactly like the thing that he's looking for, and make sure Indiana Jones is like kind of an idiot who doesn't sleep a lot. Like that would be the best way to make sure that secret is kept, and you're like, hey, go get this shiny cup thing, wrap it in a blanket, show no one, don't look at it, don't name it.
Yep.
And then he's like, okay, boss, and then he goes, gets it, comes back.
Absolutely.
That would be a way to combat.
Yeah, because I definitely want the feeling of if you have an enemy that can make use of these, make use of these abilities, that it kind of feels like you're always being watched and you always have to be watching your back.
Yeah.
Like how having a scrying bad guy should feel like, I think. And I like the idea of the like merely knowing something damns you.
Yeah.
It's not actions or inactions. It is the fact that like you're now aware of this is what's damning, and I think that's a really cool feeling,
right?
Like,
especially
like a really cool sense of dread.
I think especially with that, is a great way to like just plot hook your players with something where it's like they're doubling in a dungeon and they come across a book with some archaic language on it, right? They they think it's interesting, they go to get it like translated or whatever, and so the dude who translates it goes missing because all of a sudden big bad evil guy just killed him.
Or if you've got like you've got some wizard character who like actually knows a lot about this stuff, or so in whatever kind of game that I would put this in, I would have like a lot of the skills related, like a lot of the talents related to dreaming would actually just be like a skill that you would put ranks into, and it wouldn't actually be like a like it wouldn't be like a magical thing necessarily. It'd be a separate sort of thing that some people know how to do and some people don't.
Okay, so here's a thought. Relating to an episode that we did previously, Memory Palace.
Yeah, exactly.
So is this like, this is basically the opposite of the Memory Palace?
Yeah, this is they really wouldn't be
like
compatible.
This is your like the Memory Palace is your internal, hard drive, and then the dream is basically just like everyone being connected.
Everything else, yeah.
Would those be like a person who is good at one? Does that necessarily mean that they would be good at another? Or
I don't know. I don't even know if I would have both of them in the same setting. Like or maybe it would be instead it would be like their minor dream that you're getting caught in. If that makes sense.
I mean, I think that if a person was to put both of them in their setting, I think it would make sense for like a Memory Palace to exist in the dream. But these are just ideas.
And those are like those really are things I do want. Like I want this to be like a weird, like a place where everything you're not really sure of. And because one of the things that exists in the dream there are a lot of entities and other consciousnesses that are there that some people have kind of an idea of what they are. Some of them are more familiar than others, but a lot of them are very unknown. So like there are people in the dream that are regulars in a sense. They're like, this person's probably like an oracle that is consulting the dream to sort of like to get their prophecies and they're into defined omens. But there would be others that are like this doesn't feel like, it doesn't look like, it doesn't have the same presence as a man, and it's here, and it's sort of like you don't like there are a lot of rumors and beliefs about things that exist in the dream without like a concurrent body. Like, so like, is this like people, are there things that just like live here and people don't know about? And
I think that'd be super cool.
Exactly.
Like things that, could explain in universe, like sleep paralysis or like, nightmares and things like, I mean, and you can really jazz it up and you're like, every time you sleep, this Freddy Krueger monster comes to get you, and like maybe it's trying to like get out of the dream.
I totally think that possession should be completely possible through this. And so what, there should be some, physical things that can happen. So like you can have terrible nightmares that like disrupt your rest. And I think like up to, and this is like really rare in extreme circumstances, or someone who's really powerful, like I think you should be able to be killed. Like you have a heart attack like while you're sleeping. I think that should be something that's totally possible.
Okay.
And although rare, but I think that would be really cool. And
so what happens
if you
die in your dream? Do you die in real life?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, well, okay. I mean, but if you die in real life, you die in the dream.
Okay,
that's what I mean.
I gotcha.
But
so if you die in the dream, you wake up.
Yeah, most of the time.
But if you're abducted in the dream, someone else can take your body.
Probably.
Okay.
That's it. That wouldn't be something that would be normal, but it'd be something that would be possible. And it's something. There's a lot of things that would be. People would talk about them a lot more than they actually happen because they don't know. They don't really understand it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want there to be a bunch of entities in there that are like have ominous names, like the Watcher. And one thing that exists from like astral projection and like actual New Age sort of belief is the Dweller on the Threshold, which is such a badass name.
Yeah,
which is what that is a being or like a consciousness that when you're trying to lucid dream and then astrally project in New Age, a belief that there's like a thing there that like stops you and is really like intimidating. And people sort of say that's kind of like your like the shadow of yourself. So it's like kind of, and maybe that's what it would be like. I think it'd be, if I'm gonna have a direct analog to that, it would be the guardian between your minor dream and the like the dream proper.
Okay.
But maybe I want it to be something more powerful than that, because Dweller on the Threshold is just such a badass
Yeah,
thing.
it does sound super, but basically it's the gatekeeper to great power in the dream.
Yeah, exactly.
Dweller on the Threshold. God,
I know.
dang.
That's so cool.
Yeah, no, it's got a ring to it.
So I want there to be a lot of things. I want there to be things that people try to avoid and flee from. You know, like there'd be times where like, oh, I'm just going on my regular dream. I'm gonna go and try to invade the mind of the big bad evil guy and learn some things and interrogate him in his sleep. And you're like, oh, roll random encounter. Like, oh man, like the Watcher's here. Like the burning eye of something is like appearing in your dreams, and you're like, I gotta get out.
Yep.
I got it. Nope. You know, and there's a very like. This whole thing is very analogous to like cyberspace and stuff like Shadowrun or other cyberpunk
I mean,
stuff.
this whole thing kind of seems like a like you could draw a really good analog to like an MMORPG. Like, yeah, this is the MMORPG that you access while you're sleeping, and other people can access the dream all at the same time. And you just kind of hang out and have a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely want there to be like a network of people in there that interact. And there's sort of an uneasy community where everyone's kind of like, in some sense, sort of like the like more not so much now, but more like the early internet where people were like, can we really trust anyone that we're on here with? Like, do we know who these people are?
The like real, like slightly sketchy like chat rooms or whatever.
Yeah. And and that's also exacerbated by in real life magic users who a lot of the people who can access this would be magic users are can use each other's souls as a literal power source.
Yep.
So or like so like there's a lot of antagonism naturally between magic users in this setting. So they're people will be suspicious of each other trying to like figure out their address so they can go and take your head and use you for your arcane experiments and power.
So here's a thought that I had that I think would be just kind of cool to at least set up as an NPC. A wizard who like goes out to do a whole bunch of stuff, like a bunch of cool things, but then memory wipes himself and like leaving notes or something perhaps as a way to kind of like safeguard this knowledge so that nobody can try to dream about this knowledge and then find him. Right? It's like he's got this giant tower where he built it, he put everything there, but he has no idea where anything's at because he's mind wiped himself.
Yes, I think stuff like that would work totally. One thing I think you've already picked up on this, but I in my notes I said it explicitly, but I haven't said it explicitly yet. But the dream exists in the present. It's so it's ephemeral. It has the shadow of the past in it and the premonitions of the future, but it doesn't have either of them in it. Okay. So you can try to guess, like you can see where things maybe were before, and you can kind of see where things are going, but the only thing that you can be really sure of is what's known currently right now. And so doing something like mind wiping yourself would take that information out of the dream and would keep it from being picked up by a passerby or someone trying to just troll the wastes there and try to learn something or go after you specifically, right?
Yeah. Well, there'd be if I'm Indiana Jones, the actual like cool guy, I go out there, find a thing, go bring it back to my storehouse, and then mind wipe myself. There's a period of time in there between when I find it and when I store it, or when I find it when I mind wipe myself. That's something, where I'm vulnerable. So is there a Magneto mask?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's more like I know this thing is possible. I don't know how. Possibly through a Magneto mask or through, maybe you could do it through just like through the skill, or maybe there's some magical stuff.
Also, in the event that someone's listening to this that doesn't know what a Magneto mask is, Basically, it's a helmet that Magneto uses to block himself from his mind being accessed by Professor X. So basically, it's like a no cell phone zone around your head for the
Faraday
dream.
cage?
Yeah, a Faraday cage. Well, again, I don't know. Yes, they're called Faraday cages. You make them out of chicken wire, but basically, yeah, it's like you put your phone in a chicken wire box, and then you have no reception, and then take that same basic concept. Theme it magically and then put it over your head, and all of a sudden you can't access the dreaming, and the dreaming can't access you anymore.
You can disconnect yourself from the dream.
Okay.
But it's very distressing.
Oof.
And it's something that over the course of days you'll feel it, and you won't be able to relate to other people. Like specifically, like what I want the first adverse effects to be would all be social things. It's like you no longer can like get what like the body language and the subtle communications and the subtext of communicating with other people you would start to lose and miss out on.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways it'd be like becoming autistic.
It'd be like the spark of life. Maybe not the spark of life, like it'd be like a spark of creativity.
Not the spark of life. It's your connection to others that you lose. Because that's what the dream is.
Yeah.
Like,
You're right.
It's your connection to others, and it's your connection to the also it's your connection to others in the actual social sense and the cultural sense as well. You would start to lose a lot of the common sense and sort of baked in like unconscious knowledge that you would have from your culture, if that makes sense. So you may end up having to things that you've always done because that's just the way they've been done. You've always done them. You'd have to be rethinking that and being like, oh, what do I do now? Oh yeah, I've always done this. Okay, I guess I'm going to do that now. And you'd have to, in a sense, relearn that muscle memory.
Okay.
So it would be, would
that be a thing like taking off your shoes before you walk on the carpet?
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. And it'd be like you'd be forgetting things like that. And it would be something that would over time drive you crazy or it would be very distressing. And some people would have the fortitude and the will to be able to do it, but very, very few.
Yeah.
And those people are likely people you don't want to hang out with.
Yeah, they'd be unpleasant.
Yeah. So I want there to be like a very like an existential consequence to doing that.
Yeah.
One that's there'd be some sort of in-game stats, but one that's really more about I would try to like describe to the player like this is what you feel like not being able to do this. Like you like Darren's looking at you and his face is supposed to mean something, but you don't know what it is anymore. Like that, there'd be that kind of thing.
Okay, I gotcha. Okay, so theoretical situation: someone builds a dreaming Faraday cage, right?
Yeah.
And you stick 2 people in there. Are those 2 people still connected?
I would say so.
Okay,
and
so it's
I
like
think
a little local dreaming.
Yeah,
thing.
and that's actually leads me to some pretty neat ideas, because if you had things like that were sealed off, I think that they would.
You'd like develop your own culture completely independent.
It would be kind of like how it would be like extrapolating, where you have some starting conditions and then you start to go way off, where you would start to drift away from the rest of the population. It's like isolated community, like evolution in isolated communities, things like that. Like
but the more people that you get in this isolated dreaming, cloud, the more normal they would be, at least to each other. Yeah. And like the more people, obviously the more socially accepted the communal behavior is.
But I actually really do like the idea of there being communities that have sealed themselves away through some means, right?
Or like maybe it's a natural Faraday cage that exists somewhere, and like those people, like in a real life example, like maybe it's New Zealand or Madagascar, and like there's a natural like dreaming Faraday cage there, and the people there, when you go there, are weird. If you stay too long, you go crazy.
It's different. Well, it's different you wouldn't be able to access it through the dream. Like, even I'm thinking like if we're going to use like a European analog, like you would be able to see like you get the feeling, and you'd be able to barely like sort of perceive like the Orient, and you'd be able to sort of tell that like there are cultures over there. You could, with some effort, you could go over there and like see how different things are, and you may have like a hard time sort of interfacing with a whole different culture, because you're not really interacting unless you're interacting with an actual consciousness wandering around in the dream proper. You're not interacting with an individual person. You're interacting with like a whole culture.
Yeah.
And so if you're if that culture is alien to you, then it could be really difficult for you to get things from it. It would be like reading a different language. But you could still see that it was there.
Okay.
And something that would be in this Faraday cage you would not even know that it was not there.
Okay. It just doesn't exist.
Exactly.
Okay.
But if you were to like break that cage, then that would probably be a pretty big
you wouldn't
disruption.
know. Yeah. Well, would you know that it didn't exist at some point in time?
If that cage broke open, you'd be like, that wasn't here before.
Yeah, there's a disturbance in the force.
And in the in the history of the dream, you would be able to tell that it wasn't there before, and now it is.
I gotcha.
Something that I also this is like very like all this is kind of workshopping, but this is very workshopping. Is one thing that I want there to be bad consequences for extremely high population concentrations. Like I want, like, if there's too many people that live in the same place, in think about like London equivalent, like London in the context of a kind of Renaissance time period where it's like there are these like actually quite extreme concentrations of people, or if it's just starting, it's pre-industrial, like it's just starting to be like, oh my god, this is like, we haven't had, like, we've had cities before, but we haven't had anything of this magnitude yet. I think that there should be things should happen, and I'm not exactly sure what that would be. To
me, and especially living in a city, and like having visited places like San Francisco, San Diego isn't that bad, but like you get high populations, and especially high population density, like people go crazy. Or I guess in those senses, it's just the people are more evident because there's a higher population that become more visible. But
you see more outliers.
Yeah, you see more outliers, and maybe like in a very high population density area, like the dreaming is so full of like so many different inputs into, or I guess outputs into the dream, that like for some people it's information overload and they go crazy.
Yeah.
I guess that's a shoe-in example for me, but maybe it's more of a, like, everyone here is a little crazy in one way.
Whatever it is, it needs to be something that would cause adventure. It's kind of like that.
This is an adventure hook?
It should be able to be used for one.
Okay.
That whatever
and the adventure is eliminating half of all life in the city.
Everything in balance.
Okay, so here's a thought that I just had. Well, actually, that I had, earlier. Hive minds. Do they relate in any way, shape, or form to the city, or not the city, the dream?
I'm not sure if there's any hive minds that exist in my setting.
Or
right
like,
now.
Oh, okay, just in your general, or in your setting in general. Because I was thinking like,
but
maybe that could be one of those incredibly high population density things.
I think that would be pretty cool, actually. Like there is this sort of and it would be something that would affect people of low willpower, more or less. So like player characters would have to start like making saves and be like, oh man, like, are you able, like, do you succumb to this? And like people could, you could be shaken out of it. Like if you're aware of what's going on and you've got people around you that can help you out, like you'll probably be fine. You'll probably be able to be kept out of it. But if not, then you're turning, I don't know, like some zombie thing.
Yeah,
I don't
like
know.
You just start doing the things I don't know, like your conscious brain like turns off and your unconscious brain turns on.
Yeah, and people all start acting in unison or so, things like
or
that.
Part of me imagines it kind of like a beehive, or
People
I don't know, just different kinds of like you just know what's going on.
Yeah, but it has to be so like yes, but then it also has to be sinister.
Oh yeah.
So and I'm saying it has to be sinister because it needs to be a hook for adventure, and just like the flavor of my setting is I wanted to be a little more grim.
Yeah.
So it has to be something that's bad in
some
way.
So is this one of those things where, unlike a beehive perhaps, like a city with too much population density that's undergoing this kind of like craziness, perhaps hive mind thing, or if the hive mind sickness is something that would go into your setting, like eventually this high population density and like dream overload, to me it would just be like, this place is going to implode. Like society will break down here if something isn't done.
Like I like the idea of everyone like going through the motions to the point, and like at first it'd be fine, but then it would get to a point where it's sort of like a machine, it would be stuck in a programming terms that I don't remember. An
unending loop.
Yeah, and where it would just get to a point where it would be falling apart. Like people are like, oh, I'm gonna go to the mill to get flour, and then there's no flour there, but they're like,
but you still.
Well, you'd be like, oh, there's no flour here. I was like, well, there'll be flour here tomorrow. Like, there's always flour here. So, like, I'll come back tomorrow. And, people, that's what I'm kind of thinking, where it's like, they're not like in absolute blatant disregard of reality. Like, they get they don't have flour, but they're like, oh, well, it'll be here soon. Like, it'll be back.
Known.
It'll be back. Like, we'll get it. And the people that are supposed to bring the wheat to the mill are like stuck in something else. That may be a way to do it. I really like the idea. I definitely like the idea of like the hive mind thing happening, or it being something that maybe could be induced. And but I'm wondering if if there's more, or if maybe it's something where like when they're in this state they're weakened in some way, and so you're able to like achieve sinister plots and somehow.
So like an appropriately powerful dreamer could, find a place that has very high population density and be like, ooh, this is exploitable. I will turn this place into my mindless army.
Exactly.
Or,
or
engine of destruction.
I mean, you would be able to see armies moving across, like in the dream. Just just to say, like, just the amount of people moving, you would be able to do that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's super cool. I like that.
Yeah, and
can you imagine going into the dream and like watching like, well, you never watched Game of Thrones, so I was gonna say Battle of the Bastards, but just like two giant freaking armies.
Oh yeah,
clashing.
Yeah,
and you're not getting like high fidelity stuff, but.
Oh, you could feel the vigor and the death happening. Yeah. Absolutely.
Man, that's crazy. And then like you just wait for them all to go to sleep, and then you realize like you get
you
get the nitty gritty.
Yeah. And that's exactly the kind of experience that I want of someone who's in this, where they're kind of like, I'm describing everything in metaphor, or it's like you feel this way, and when you're like, when you're going through the dream, you're not like viewing some sort of map when you're like, oh, there's things over here. It's like it would be like you're actually dreaming. Like that's how it would feel like. So where you're like, oh hey, you're thinking like, you think about like the town that you've been to that's close by there, and then you're wandering around the streets. And then you look down the you look down the street, and it's not exactly how you remember it, but you know that you're still looking down Main Street, and you know that that's looking to the east, and you're seeing actually beyond the mountain, and you know where you're looking. You're looking beyond the mountain. You shouldn't be able to see that there, but you can right now. That's just how dreams work. You can just and you're seeing, and you're looking in this valley, and you can see, like, two waves moving up and down this valley, crashing into each other, and they're not like it's not actually like a wave. You start to look at one, and it's more like you see I'll describe the flag of one country. Like, that's the kind of thing where it's like very stream of consciousness.
A metaphor that I was just thinking is like, you see, perhaps an eagle and a wolf like duking it out, and like
exactly,
they're hashing it, and the eagle takes out the wolf's eye, but the wolf like pulls off its leg, and then like in some rough metaphor, like that's a narrative of the battle. And
perhaps. Like you see that, and then you can kind of feel like deep inside you can feel like the din of battle and the earth rumbling, and you've got like in your more present in your mind, you've got like a metaphor of what's going on. Yeah. But then you can feel in your bones like what's happening as well.
And if you witness this or like have experience with this kind of a premonition before, or I guess it wouldn't really be a premonition, it'd be like a presentimation.
Yeah.
Whatever. There's probably a prefix for that. If someone studied Latin, get me the prefix means currently.
Speaking of Latin, I think I would call this terra somnolens.
Terra somnolens?
Like that would be the or something close to that. Okay. Which is just, land of dreams or land of sleep is like I was literally like on Google Translate.
Terra.
Yeah.
Land, som, and then Eulens.
And that would be like that would be another name for it.
That would be the academic name.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. There is
that's really hard to say. So there's
a wizard. Like there's the
first guy to write it down.
There's a non-religious wizard order that everything is just in Latin.
Yeah,
like that,
of course.
And, because it's cool. All right, like
all right.
It speaks to it speaks to us. Like we hear that and we're like,
cool shit is in Latin.
We hear like Ars Magica and we're like, oh yeah, that's how I am.
Yeah, no, whenever I'm trying to like name stuff or anything like that, a lot of times I'll be like, how does this sound in Russian? Yeah, like in the Wish Dragon episode description, a Manchik is I think it's Russian for like trickster or like something similar to that. I mean, and distorted enough where it's not incredibly obvious. Oh yeah, but yeah, no, I could probably use more Latin, but I think it's also like a trope that I almost want to stay away from.
Yeah, I'm embracing it, and I'm also embracing bad Latin too, because I'm sure that that's not like the proper forms of those words, and I'm like, I don't care, it sounds cool, and I just hope that you don't mind. It's like Warhammer 40k apparently has a lot of really bad Latin in it.
Oh, I would not expect anything else from Warhammer.
Exactly, 40K. But it also is badass. Yeah, like as a layperson, like reading all the like pseudo Latin stuff that they have, I'm like,
right, Imperium.
Yeah, I'm like, God. Yeah.
Dude, r/Grimdank. Like I don't
Grimdank. Like I haven't heard of that.
Like Ian said it on. I think it was when we were playing D&D one time. But occasionally there's like memes that someone puts on there, and it's like someone who actually knows Warhammer 40k lore and is in Grimdank or whatever, and me, and it's just like. The little baby with the giant eyes, like looking around. It's like the only thing that I know is the jokes and memes I see in Grimdank.
Warhammer 40k is really cool when you're not just having a huge wank fest about how cool Space Marines are, or about how brutal the Imperium is. If you're like actually getting into the lore and stuff, then it's really cool. Mm-hmm. That's been my experience.
Yeah.
As a middle schooler, I was like, I hate this. I'm so fucking tired about hearing my friend talk about how dope the Space Marines are. It's just a bunch of like I may have said this before on the podcast, but I'm ripping this off from someone else. I think it was Mandalore Gaming who said this, who's a YouTuber. But he described Warhammer 40k as if when you're on the playground and you're playing make believe and you're like, you're being superheroes or whatever, and you're like, oh man, I shoot my lasers at you, and you're like, oh no, and like the other person's like, no, you can't harm me, I've got this anti-laser force field, and you're like, all right, well, we're gonna go fisticuffs. I'm like, oh, well, I just destroy you because I'm the strongest thing in the universe. And you're like, what? God. It's the kind of, you had the kind of kid that was just like, he was just like, I'm like, always the best thing ever, right? Yeah. And like, there's not that give and take. Mm-hmm. Now imagine you got like a bus of like 7 of those kids, and one of them was like the super kid. Right? Oh my god. And each of them made a different faction in Warhammer 40K.
Oh my god.
That's kind of how the lore works. Like everything, like with the super kid being the one that made the Space Marines.
Okay.
Everything else, except for like the Tau, I don't know, like the Tau aren't really they aren't really like super egregious or extreme in any way, I find, at least. Okay. But like,
which in Warhammer is extreme in its own way.
Yeah, but every other faction is like the most outrageous in some particular way.
Oh my gosh.
And they're all really cool, except for maybe orcs. I don't really like orcs because they're they're like it's like cool and dumb at the same time. They're like actually psychic space fungus.
Oh, yeah. I think I've either read or talked to you about this before.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And
exactly.
I mean, congrats, you subverted the trope. I think it's one of those things where like it'd be cool if they weren't called orcs. It's like, here's a psychic space fungus.
It would be cool if it was in a different setting.
Oh, okay.
That's my opinion on it.
Well,
like they would be, and I know people would disagree with me, but in my opinion, it's like they would be cool if it was in like a more satirical setting.
Oh, okay.
Because everything else kind of takes itself pretty seriously.
Okay.
But then orcs are like, wow, I'm green. I'm a fungus, and I believe that my gun works, and so my gun works. Like, I believe that this asteroid is like a crazy battleship, and so now it's a crazy battleship. And I'm like,
that's still kind of cool.
Yeah.
Okay, back to the dreaming.
Yeah, okay. So, Somnolence, bad Latin. Warhammer
40K.
Warhammer 40K. Yeah, well, let me check my notes. What were we saying before? Well, either way, skimming through my notes, some other things that I want to talk about is that I think that there are things in my setting that I've kind of classified as being like unnatural, and they sort of have this. In many ways, I want them to feel out of place and wrong, and undead and revenants, like I've talked about before. Yep. And so both of those things, I think they would be in the dream, and it would feel bad. There would be like a kind of corruption that would be there.
Okay.
And so yeah, like and if I ever have ghosts or whatever, like that kind of thing, those would exist there as well. And I think that I'm not sure exactly what it would be, but I wanted it to be something that you'd be scared of, and you would kind of know the presence of. So you could, like a regular person could go to sleep and have like nightmares and have ravenous hunger pains and have sleep paralysis and all these terrible things, and wake up and be like, make your like knowledge check, like you're like a history or cult, some kind of generic knowledge check, and you're like, yeah, there's some like bad mojo undead shit around here, and that like maybe you're wrong, maybe you just had bad luck and you just had these terrible dreams, or like all of you in your party had bad luck and terrible dreams, or it's likely that there is a spirit ripped from another ripped from hell and put back unwillingly in a body, and it's rage and ravenous hunger and existential crisis.
It infects your dreams.
Exactly, yeah. And it infects the reality around it. That's kind of something that I want to have happen.
So like if you had a gnarly, necromancer shindig happening in the catacombs of some city, it would stand to reason that like the people on the surface would be like, I cannot freaking sleep.
Like there are like massive bouts of nightmares and sleepwalking, and people wake up and they're like, murder their, like they like suffocate their kids, and they're
Mhm.
like, oh my god, what happened? I didn't
Yeah.
do that. Like I what was going on? And then people who are in the know, and there'd
Mhm.
be a very small minority of people. Like I'm kind of imagining like the knowledge of the dream is sort of less than, at least in the culture that most of the game would take
Mhm.
place in, most of the setting is, would know less about the dream than they do about like a lot of magic sort of
Yeah.
things.
Okay. And I mean, magic is already a little
Yeah,
on the
exactly.
secretive side.
Exactly. It's
Do you
kind of
think?
it's kind of like its own. There's a lot of magic that accesses the dream, and people don't even realize that,
Yeah.
or they don't necessarily have knowledge of
And
that.
I mean, this whole kind of concept is not something like you were saying that the players would necessarily like know about or need to know about in any way, but I think it's important to have, because it facilitates, these ideas of, okay, like, like this is all happening. Okay, now I can, a hive mind, or like this is what happens when too many
Yeah.
people are around,
Well,
or this is what happens when there's a necromancer.
The sort of thing that I want
you can build
to,
that into like plots.
Yeah, the sort of thing that I want to do is like, you've got a book that you're slowly translating,
Mhm.
and every time you spend downtime translating, I give you another paragraph that's
Mhm.
like, this is a synopsis of what you've learned. Like
Yeah.
that would be something that I would totally do.
Mhm.
Or it would be oh man, that would actually be really cool. Like you get a book like that, some ancient long forgotten tome.
Yeah.
Like this is the only copy that
Mhm.
is maybe in existence, and as you're translating it, you're like, oh wait, we've been seeing all these things. Like,
Mhm.
oh no, like this is actually, like, all this terrible shit that's describing all these things that are possible, like that's actually happening right now.
Yeah.
And
it's
then
one of those things where it's like that, like, oh my god, is that why this happened?
yeah, and then I think it would be really cool where you have a I just think this would be really funny, and like it'd be a play on expectations where you have a race to have downtime to finish translating the
Oh
book.
my god.
Right? Like
That's how I felt when I gave Courtney that like the Book of Endless Knowledge or whatever. It's like, let's just take some fucking short rests or long rests, and we're
Right?
just gonna power through this and like just make some checks and learn everything there is to know about everything. But no, I think that's cool.
Yeah.
Where it's like, yeah, you can spend a long rest and you can, get a little bit more. I think it would be, at least me as a player and as a person who, a purveyor of like video game lore and things, like I'm a big fan of like experiencing something and then learning how it works afterwards.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh, they can do this, that, and the other thing, and that's why, this is the way it is. This is why the other thing's the way it is. And I can imagine like, you finish, the Necromancer and the Catacombs plot, which now I kind of want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Mr. Wizard player a few sessions later or like very farther down the road is just now discovering like, oh my gosh, like undead infect dreams.
Yeah, and
it's through these means.
And what I think, what I like, what like the perfect thing for me would be you experience something, you learn what it is, and you learn how it works, and then you sort of learn something on, you learn either just a little bit more or just a little bit to the side, where you have a moment where like, wait, we could do that. Like I want that. I want people to be like, oh man, I'm putting these pieces together, and now this means this thing. Like I love that sort of stuff as like a player, where I'm like suddenly putting these pieces together, where I'm like, wait, does that mean I can do this? Like,
right, and the DM slowly nods his head from across the table.
The DM, I don't know, like you're just silent. It's like in Earth Dawn when I learned that horror. I haven't talked about Earth Dawn for a while. When I learned horrors were not name givers. So you're giving me a blank stare.
Yeah,
so
I recall this.
Yeah. Whereas so like name givers are basically the playable races. So something that's a name giver in Earth Dawn is something that can, hey, give something a name. Wow, and it's basically something that can kind of create culture and legends. And then, but. So you just kind of think like, oh, it's sentient, like it's smart, it talks. Oh, it's a name giver. It talks as a name giver, whatever, But then, wait a second, horrors aren't name givers,
but they still check most of the rest of the boxes.
They check the rest of the boxes. Like, oh wait, no, that's because like horrors are beings of corruption. Like they take what is there and then they change it and morph it, and it's something where like they need something first to latch on. Where like I learned that naming horrors actually makes them more powerful. Like you have a horror and it's just an anonymous horror, like it actually can't do that much until it creates a legend for itself through other people telling about the terrible things that it did. When I was learning this, I was like, like face being blown back with like knowledge. And I'm like, oh my God, you know, like that was the kind of that was my experience. And like, so, I want to create that sort of thing.
I got you. So like, pulling from the game that we were playing previously, like if there was the Glen Sheen Poltergeist would be much more popular, or not much more popular, much more powerful after receiving that name than it was when it earned the name.
Absolutely.
Okay. That's dope.
I know.
I like it.
I know. That's so cool. And I like, if you're someone who knows that, like when you like, it's something that, like I don't really feel like you could tell people that, because first it would sort of, I don't know, like that's super terrifying if you're living in a world where, these things exist
and it's important to like categorize things in order to like be able to defeat them. And it's like the moment you categorize it with a name, it becomes more powerful.
But like
good luck.
as you're learning about like a threat that you're gonna have to face, and you're like, oh, it's named now. Oh, people are talking about it. Like the reason why it's gotten to me is because they made it so bad to begin with, and like there's nothing that I can like I can't stop that from happening. And now I need to go in and fix this problem. And the more that I tell people about this, the more that I try to protect people from this, the worse it gets. Like
I think that's great.
Yes.
Like it's that terrible choice that a player would have to make, like through their character, and it's like, oh boy, like there's no winning this one, but like how do I justify what evil? Like, do I just allow these people to get slaughtered like sheep, or do I allow themselves to arm themselves hopelessly against this now much more powerful thing? Like both options are losing options.
I know,
which is amazing.
It's so cool.
I mean, frustrating if you're a player, but also drives interesting change. You know what? Funny reference I could make, especially relating to these like horrors and like naming things. These horrors are like Star Wars background characters. Eventually, they get a name and they become incredibly interesting.
Oh,
like the dude with the ice cream maker.
God.
I just think that's hilarious. Like George, just don't. It's not important.
I don't even know if it's George.
I don't. It might just be, whoever. Well, LucasArts, I suppose it would have been at that point.
Probably LucasArts. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're just like, let's just milk this, and we'll just keep going. And this person we mentioned offhandedly in a novelization, well, he's got a backstory in a few comics.
I think what happened is that there's just so long periods of time where like there wasn't Star Wars, like an actual another Star Wars movie, or there wasn't more Star Wars content that people are like like they I've heard Star Wars, I've heard analogies between Star Wars and like Star Wars canon and like religious canon. Like obviously
I can see that.
Obviously, like the canon, like the term canon comes from like biblical history. Like it's
basically it's like the longer you have between content dumps, the more you delve into the very nitty details.
Exactly. Like,
Jesus walked with his right foot into a thing first, and for whatever reason that was mentioned, so it must be important.
Yep.
And what was their sandals made out of, or like whatever, or in a Buddhist text some eagles were mentioned or something, so that must be important. I don't know anything about Buddhism, but that's kind of what I'm
thinking. I think it's very similar where it's that where you've got like this one thing that everyone agrees is so incredibly important, such a big deal, and now everyone's obsessing over and trying to pull as much as they can out of it. And that's the having the ice cream maker the guy running with an ice cream maker that, by the way, they didn't like dress up the ice cream. Like
it is just an ice cream maker.
Ice cream. Like you can't tell.
Like
it looks like it's a good prop.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, you can, people have cosplayed as this guy. They just buy the ice cream maker. And and it's around cons.
Yeah, and you see a picture of that same model of ice cream maker, and you put that against the frame.
I bet it's really
in the movie.
Heavy.
Oh, I'm sure.
Like think about how much like your KitchenAid mixer weighs.
Yeah. Well,
but this
I
is
suppose
like
that's how it would depend on how the ice cream maker is used, right? Like maybe you just put a bunch of ice and salt in like an outer thing, and then you put the cream and milk and vanilla and sugar in the middle part, and you just start churning away.
I would assume that. I mean, I could be wrong.
Maybe when it's empty, it's really not that heavy.
Maybe.
Well,
maybe that guy's a buff.
Maybe he's incredibly strong, and that's why he has a backstory.
How many takes did he have to do for that?
Oh my gosh! Hopefully,
back muscles.
Right. Hopefully, not too many. He'd be sore after that.
All right. So I think that I wonder if there's anything that I can pull from this horror idea into the dream. I don't know. I'm reaching here. It's just like
I think
so cool.
the things that exist in the dream would be like parallel to like horrors.
I think knowing about them, I think it'd be kind of like a placebo effect, like knowing that it exists and knowing that you could be like say possessed or have like a possessed, not in the like, oh, now I have a different body in me and I'm gonna go about my day, but I'm actually a different person. Possessed in the sense like you wake up in the night, like you wake up in the morning and you're not where you were before. You've got blood on your hands and you're like, oh my God, what happened? That kind of possession.
Okay.
Like knowing that that's something that can happen, I think would make you more susceptible to it.
Yeah, I think absolutely. Because it kind of opens a door to knowing, but it's a two-way door.
So I want like a perfect moment of like escalating drama and tension would be, let's say you've got you're in London analog and you have printing presses, like you have broadsheets, so you don't have like, you basically have like prototype newspapers, right? Okay. And then you wake up in the morning, you go outside, you see the newspaper, and it's like it just says like nightmare possession is possible or something, something like that. Some pithy headline that just is like, you can be possessed by going to sleep, or like don't dream anymore, and then you play your character, you know what's going on, and you're just like, no. I want that. And then session end, like shit-eating grin on your face as the GM, best feeling, pack up your stuff, walk
like
out the door,
playing the game. It's like, because I'm sorry everyone, but since you just thought of the game, you lose.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's like, don't think about polar bears, good luck.
I like the idea a lot. I definitely like the idea. I was thinking of possession maybe more like, okay, I should have both. I was thinking of possession kind of like another person's consciousness like goes into your body, and then they're just in you for a while.
Kind of like puppeteers you
until like you go to sleep or something like that.
Which,
and then you have to fight over
I think it would
again.
be very similar to like sleepwalking.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that that's something that should happen, but I also think that there should be something that's closer to like actual sleepwalking, like
like natural
sleepwalking and sleep murder,
right? It's in the intention, man. Like, he wasn't a good guy, and you put him down.
But I like the idea that like you could have, like you're obviously like not present there, and there's something, whatever is possessing you isn't also quite like a full consciousness either. Like, you're not really there, but you're doing terrible, heinous acts, right? Yeah. Which are really like the souls of the undead things in the catacombs beneath the city that are trying to like get out into a real body. Yeah. And then when they get there, they're just, I haven't been able to find a good way to describe what I exactly like. Okay, I have found a good way to describe how what like an undead spirit is like, or what it is, but only in like a very like a very succinct way, and I just
Greg's hands are and I
just
Greg's hands are like making a box right now of like varying like widths, heights, and it's really funny. It's like he's doing an interpretive dance with parallel hands.
I would describe an undead soul like the gnashing of teeth.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Isn't that cool?
That's evocative but super vague.
I know. I know. That's the best that I can give you. But like the gnashing of many teeth, and it's like then you're like that's in you now, and that is
because that's just uncomfortable.
Yeah, and but it's like like a rage against like your physical form and against reality, and then you just do things like jump off of buildings or like smash stuff or like suffocate your kids or like that's the kind of thing that would happen, I think.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Can you imagine like a necromancer trying to keep a low profile and he's like, fuck, I forgot about the effects. All right, this whole town's going to shit.
Yeah.
I gotta move it.
Or it'd be someone, this is even better, all right?
Okay.
He's a necromancer, but a necromancer, like, that's a profession, right?
Yes.
In a sense.
I'm a professional, not a bad guy.
It's not a moral
It's like
outlook.
a locksmith.
It's not a moral outlook on life. It's a profession.
Yeah.
Right?
Professional.
Because locksmiths, they know how to open doors, right? Yeah. Like, sure, I'm breaking and entering, but I'm still locksmithing.
Yeah,
and,
it's
right?
a profession. Someone asked me to do this. It's not.
So...
Yeah, okay.
So you're a necromancer in profession, but what you're really studying is the effects on the populace.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Right? Like I had no idea this would happen.
He
says actively writing into his notebook.
Yeah, from Doc says looking through his witch doctor his plague doctor mask, being like, I will study the effects of that's calling out to Ian there for but that's I think that would be extra sinister where it's the like the and you can he's got some kind of justification where it's like, no, I need to do this because I need to learn how this happens so we can stop it, right? But he's not really, he's more obsessed in knowing, he's more obsessed in the mystery,
but justifies it
exactly. And I think that would be really cool. That would be a really cool I like that. Hey Darren, forget that so I can run that game.
Oh no, that's fine. I'll probably because
now I just said that you're not gonna
no, that's how this works. We've just talked about this. Now that the idea is in my head,
I'll
it's
run
a two-way
for other
door.
People.
It's fine, Greg. I spilled enough beans to you about my world that like either you'll forget as you're going through it, and then afterwards you be like, oh yeah, that's right. Or like you just won't let it bother you.
It's more things where like when you had an exo at like the last the last session that we're playing in your campaign where I'm like, oh yeah, those are a thing. Like Darren said those were a thing. That's kind of been my experience so far. I'm like, oh yeah, Darren said that's a thing. Oh yeah, that's supposed to be there. Darren said that.
Yeah. No, and that's probably 99% of what would happen if like you're running something that you've talked to me about. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And then probably not remember most of the other information about it.
Yeah, well, I guess I thought it was kind of funny, and I'm not I don't blame you because I'm also terrible with names, but like I reused an NPC name basically, like an NPC concept.
Yep.
This is not an original thing, but like take for example Forgotten Realms. They use Elminster as basically like a wizard does something. Who's the wizard? Oh, it's Elminster, right? So I'm just using Veselin as my like. And wizard did something.
I was like raking my brain. I was like, who is it? Where did I hear this before? Oh yeah, in Greg's other one shot, which I still think is fine. Like,
oh yeah.
I mean, if it's the same Veselin, then that's the cool part of me. It was like, look at he's an intricate clockwork of machinations. Let me think that, Greg. It's the same man, and he's playing us from many different sides and many different one shots.
Absolutely.
Yep, he's the mastermind of the realm, this Vizzelin.
Simulacra.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a cool campaign, like a cool city.
Mm-hmm. No, I think I really want to run Necromancer in the Catacombs now too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, do you have any other thoughts about this? We're at like an hour and change.
We're at like an hour and change, yeah. And we're normally do this in like the morning or the middle of the day. It is late. It's late for us. I work at 6 because I'm not allowed to work any earlier anymore.
I mean, probably because they don't want to pay you shift differential.
Exactly.
Hey.
Because guess what? My job is like my company. My sub company is over budget, and now people are like,
really? Oof.
We're making a big. Oh yeah, we're making a big deal about like, oh man, you can't do this thing because we're over budget. You can't do this thing because we're over budget. And it's all stuff where you're like, yeah, that's fair. But you're also like, sorry, sometimes I actually do need to come into work early because there's a bunch of
There's
I do
things I need to do when people aren't around.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, there's a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
One other thing that I was thinking of doing, and this I'm a little bit lukewarm on this, but I like the idea. I thought the idea of maybe you can create separate, like you can create a separate consciousness in a sense, like so you can kind of like butt off a bit of your mind and then put it in the dream, and so you're always kind of like, it's like you're always kind of just a little, you're not really attentive. You're always kind of just
familiar with Harry Potter stuff?
No.
Okay.
Well, there's a Horcrux.
No.
Whenever I talk about it.
No. Luna Lovegood. She's like kind of the spacey, but like weirdly like perceptive, like with people things kind of person. And so that's kind of what I would imagine.
That's exactly what I want it to be, because you can like,
right. You're just always kind of staring off up into the sky.
Yeah. So one of the things that this was sort of like one of the first thoughts that came to mind when I was thinking of this, because I was like, hiking in the woods basically, and I was thinking like what I think like a cool way to use the dream, I was thinking, was that you're kind of like in this half conscious state, but you then will know things or see things or be aware of things that you really wouldn't be otherwise. And
kind of like a passive divination.
Yeah. And so in one sense, like, I'm not exactly sure how I would put this in game, because I think that when you're in a reverie, like, you should have like a perception penalty for sure, because it's like you're literally not paying attention. Like, you're literally daydreaming. That's what reverie means. It's a daydream. And but at the same time, I think you should be able to like, like, oh hey, there's like there's someone coming down that river now, and you're like, that river is like 500 feet away and we can't even see it, and you're like, I don't know, I know someone's over there, right?
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing. And so I'm not sure how I would have that come out in game. Like, maybe that would be literally just like GM drops hints, because I know as a GM, I would love to have players that could do stuff like that, because you can just drop hooks. You're just like, hey man, here's a mystery. Here's something you don't understand.
Right. And like, if you made like a class or a subclass, be like, yeah, this is your Oracle subclass of the wizard.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
And I don't know, like, it would make your job easy as a GM, I would find, if you're someone who's literally just like basically has an ability that in effect is like, hey, tell me what the interesting thing here is. And
yeah.
like,
I mean, that's like like when we were playing Monster of the Week, like the oops ability.
Yeah. Except the oops ability was a little bit harder, because I had to come up with, and Will had to come up with like a physical item that would help you. So I don't know, that was kind of weird. Like, it was honestly pretty hard to figure out.
And then I don't know, the other thing with that is, aside from like the railroad tie and the shamrock or whatever, the 4-leaf clover, like, I didn't feel like most of that stuff that I oopsed upon was particularly useful. It was just like, oh, here's additional background dressing for what we're doing. It's the Phantom of the Opera or Macbeth or whatever it was.
And
Hamlet.
So I mean, it's super easy and super like kind of lazy to just be like, oh yeah, here's a weapon to fight the baddie. There you go. That's something that's going to be useful. But I think
that ability, like, from the GM side, requires much more like forethought. It's like, yeah,
exactly.
or Or I guess improv, like, session 2, like you stumble upon a key. Well, I don't know what that means. And then you get to like session 12 and you're like,
hey, that
fuck,
key.
like, how do I open this door? Well, you've got a key.
Yeah.
My God, you're a madman. I don't know. You just like you drop something. I mean, it's standard GM stuff. Like I'm gonna roll a die, grab a trinket, and then somehow make that trinket important later.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you tickled someone with that feather, and then it makes them uncontrollably...
that cloak you found on the ground that you're now wearing, like, oh, someone's gonna see what that is.
Yeah, someone's gonna recognize you.
I've pulled that before.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, oh, hey, here's this magic ring in this cave that you found. Like, in Greg's head, you're like, I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
But it's something. And then later on, it's like, oh, so and so is like, don't show that here,
Yeah.
And you're like, but what is it? And I'm like, I'm not talking to you. And then, and then you're like, I've done that before.
I can imagine, like, you find a shield with like a very, antique sigil on it or something like that, and like nobody's ever seen it before, and then you're like, all right, well, I'm gonna build an entire fallen civilization that is, or an entire fallen like city, and their heraldry is a symbol, and it's like. The
so
player doesn't know
work.
that, but it's just like, well, I mean, not necessarily have to be the case, but it's like, oh yeah, no, someone recognizes that as like, the heraldry of a, ancient house, like a fallen one.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, it's a great way to it's a great way to like to bring action to the players. Having something like that where it's like, hey, you find something and then you're just sort of idly carrying it, and then you're like, I'm going to spring that now. I'm going to, because
I think it also requires good notes, which and also reviewing your notes, which is something I certainly don't do enough of.
One thing that I haven't had a chance to really do it because everything that I've been running recently has been so short.
Yeah.
Which I honestly really like running short things now. But I should. And this is something that I know that like other friends have done, or at least in some way they have, where I want to just have kind of like a list of like open plot threads and hooks.
Yeah, I think that would be something you just hang on the inside of your...
Yep, exactly. So you're, and you're just like, oh, give them mysterious cloak, and you just write that down. You're like, mysterious cloak, know? And then so you can kind of, you put the thing you need to know in the right spot, and then you can just look to it and be like, oh, right there, I need I
need something to bring the characters in.
Something needs to happen, and I'm like, this can happen.
Yeah, boom. You posted that up on your like the inside of your GM screen, and boom, you're good.
Yeah.
All right. Any other thoughts?
I don't know. I think we're done. I think we're getting
okay. Well,
we're getting a little late.
I mean that, and we're at like an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Almost an hour and a half.
Almost an hour.
I mean, and after editing.
Yeah.
Hello, people at 1 hour and 15 minutes.
So I definitely, one thing for sure though is that I think I made this clear, but like this is not, this is something that's different from Magic. Like Magic interacts with it, but it's a different kind of thing. It would be like if somehow, some way, fingers snap, no magic exists in the world. Like the dream is still there. Yeah,
like in an anti-magic field, you can still lucid dream and divine in that manner.
And partially, that's partially because like in my setting, kind of magic comes from like supernatural beings that have like taught man how to do this sort of stuff. So it's kind of like you have reality, and then like other things came in and started like, oh, we're gonna give you like cheat codes, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how my magic works in my setting. And so like, but like the dream is something that was there before. I honestly don't know how I want it to interact with like supernatural creatures and stuff like that. I think some of them should be like devoid of it, like they shouldn't interact with it, and others,
I think so too.
Others would like I think any creature would be in D&D terms lawful wouldn't interact with it. So like
Modrons.
Yeah, like in my setting, like what, like the Urspawn, which I need to come up with another name for. Yeah. But like the things that were basically.
What if you call them the words?
Yeah, words.
The Whispers.
But things that things that have in my setting that have true names that are kind of like exist to sort of enforce like cosmic laws.
Yeah, absolutism.
And those things they wouldn't have like the creativity.
So there's a certain amount of free will.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
In more specifically, I would say creativity and kind of connection to other people. I think that would be the biggest part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in some ways free will, but really it'd be more about creativity, is what I would say, because there could be other things that would be not connected to the dream
That
but
would
aren't
still have
necessarily
free will,
but aren't necessarily following like strict rules or whatnot. They're not made by an engine of creation to perform tasks. So yeah,
cool.
That's what I'm thinking. I mean, except for like undead being like real bad, and maybe certain playable races are more connected or not. I'm not sure about that. I kind of want it to be more like very rare. That's kind of how we're getting a little off topic here, but I always sort of like, I don't like the idea of like, oh man, all these elves have this natural magic ability sort of thing, because then that means like, oh well, elf society has to be really magical and there has to be a lot of magicians in elf society, and I'm like, I don't like that, right? Like in 5e, like, you get cantrips, right? I'm pretty sure. And you could always like, you could always kind of just say like, oh well, I mean, adventurer elves have cantrips, but if you're just like a regular elf, you don't. That's something you could easily say, but on the surface it implies that every single elf, and it's an implication, but it implies that every single elf can do magic, and that's something that I think is like a little too much. So I don't want to have a playable race that's like, oh yeah, they're so attuned to the dream, where I'm like, every person in this race dreams. I'm like, I don't like that. I don't want that. I want it to be something that's special, and I don't, the dream isn't crowded, if that makes sense. Like actual people like exploring it in other consciousnesses that that you interact with directly. It's, they're not that many people out there. It's a small community. That is not very tight knit.
It's like 3 people in a giant Minecraft server.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then you kind of like look at each other afar and you're like, you better not fuck with my shit.
Yeah. better not
do it.
Oh, one last thought that I had when you were talking about, plucking a part of your consciousness and you're like, we're going to put that in the dream. What if, like, I can just imagine a romantic fanfic between 2 people who do that, like Luna Lovegood and then Luna Lovegood's interest, who shares a very similar personality type. And like, on the one hand, like they're always like they've never seen each other, they don't know each other, but those little like wisps of consciousness like meet, and then they just become like soulmates or whatever. There, it's like they're always like hanging out in spirit or in dreams, but they
that'd be a thing. I don't like, so
I mean, I just think that's a cool possibility / like, you could write a story about that.
I think,
or something.
It would definitely it would add the kind of layers of sort of mystery and like, lacking words, hard to pin downness of the dream. Like it would allow more bizarre phenomena to happen. And so like traditionally, like from New Age theory, like the dweller on the threshold is really a part of yourself. And so like, what if you're naturally already have like a second part of you out there, which is the dweller on the threshold, and then you're kind of just learning how to either make that more powerful or to make another kind of thing that's doing a different service.
Okay.
I think that may be interesting, because like everyone always has that dweller, which is sort of like, it's just like is naturally there. It's a part of existing. It's sort of,
it's how can you force that to either split and do something else, or bend it to your will?
Or it's like you make another, or you learn how to make that stronger. So like a lot, like the dweller on the threshold is like kind of like the things about yourself you don't want to acknowledge. Is kind of something that people talk about. It's your shadow in like a Jungian kind of way, which, sorry, I've been learning a lot about psychology lately.
Man, this is some real new age psychology and philosophy.
In like the Jungian philosophy of psychology, I don't know if I'm what it's really called. Your shadow is basically like the parts of yourself that you don't like, the parts of yourself that's true that you don't realize are there, or you don't acknowledge is there.
Where so it's like you're actually a sociopath, but you just don't know it.
Or like, I mean, yeah, you could have something that extreme, but it would be things like let's say you've always grown up and you've always been like, like in your conscious mind, you've always been like, oh man, I have to be really masculine. I have to be a manly man or whatever. But then in your shadow, you're like, no, actually, like I want to be able to be sensitive or to do all these other things, like
okay.
That
you're closeted things.
Sure.
I mean, not necessarily that a person
or it may
is
be
in the
like
closet, but just like the things that you shove back.
Yeah,
because, your vulnerabilities.
Yeah, it could be like in your conscious mind, you're like, oh, I have a great relationship with my mother. I spend all this time with her. Like we talk all the time. But in your shadow, you're like, actually, I really don't have a good relationship with my mom. There's all these things that she does that really bothers me, and like I take great issue with
your resentfulness,
and I resent and I don't know how to stand up to her, and there's all these that could all be things that are within your shadow. And so I think, I'm not sure how you would do this in game, but it would be funny if you make your shadow stronger, making yourself more resistant to like bad things coming from the dream by turning yourself into like, by denying more about yourself, by becoming like a It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia character or something like that, like becoming someone who's just so unhinged from who they actually are. That would be kind of funny, and I don't think that would really work out, but that would be interesting.
I think that'd be. I think that'd be really cool to just put as an NPC where like you basically have Frank from It's Always Sunny. Yeah. He's like, he's not an idiot and he's not a terrible, well, he's a terrible person now, but like he's really just guarding himself, by being this terrible, terrible person. I imagine like all the people who like project insecurities onto people, like those would be the things that like the shadow would have, where it's like, no, I'm not like I'm like, no, you're really weak. Like you can't bench press that. Like you don't go to the gym 5 times a week. It's like, no, dude, you're just really self-conscious about your body.
Yeah, I don't think that could translate into games at all, but that would be.
I mean, there's that idea in there, which is part of the fun of world building. You know. All right.
Yeah, I think we're done now.
Yeah, I think that about wraps it up. Yeah. Thank you all so much for listening. I was going to say watching, but also we're putting a YouTube channel up. Well, I think it's already put up. I just got to upload stuff to it.
Doing that to up our SEO, and because we had a request for it, and it's relatively low effort to do.
Yeah. So the Lore Foundry on YouTube, also the Lore Foundry at gmail.com, also lorefoundry.com. You can visit all those things. I'm gonna try to.
This is with a on our YouTube.
Oh yeah, the Lore Foundry YouTube channel. Yeah, because it pulled directly from our hosting service. Makes and runs the Lore Foundry on our hosting service. And if you have any questions, comments, complaints about you
guys talk too long. You don't have a regular upload schedule.
Yeah, these are things we already know, but just tell us anyways. Just if you're out there, and you're like, man, what would make Darren really, really happy? Make a new email address and email me. So I don't recognize who you are, and be like, man, I love the podcast. I shared with my whole D&D crew.
Tell Greg to edit.
Tell Greg to get his shit together and edit faster. Because it doesn't 3-week turnaround time.
It doesn't take me that long to do it. I just don't do it.
Gosh, every email you send me, I forward to Greg.
Yeah, and they're always a lot of fun. Yeah. Especially
they always talk about how great the audio quality is, but they never talk about the great descriptions, which is starting to make me think that I need to up my description game. Yeah, so if anybody's got some examples, let me know.
Step it up.
But as a Tin Copper bot told me in a world building Discord called The Realm, it's great. References are great for other world builders, so expect more of those in the descriptions and perhaps less flowery narrative language. Otherwise, keep on world building. I don't know. We probably will get a tagline.
We reached no
tagline.
I'm against taglines.
All right, fine.
We'll talk about it.
All
later.
Right, we'll talk about it later. No taglines.
No taglines. This protein powder on my phone.
Oh my god.
All right.
You realize that that's going to get between the cracks and there's
Hey, Mom.
like 99.9998% of dollar
protein, Mom?
of
Where's my
$1
fucking
bills
protein?
have protein powder on them.